In the dark shadows and in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast, we are the brave and bold. Our men began to undermine the towers and walls. From every side, stones were hurled from the Tormenti and the Petravari. And so many arrows that fell like hail. The servants of God bore this patiently, sustained by the premise of their faith. Whether they should be killed or should presently prevail over their enemies, the battle showed no indication of victory. But when the machines were drawn nearer to the wall, they hurled not only stones and arrows, but also burning wood and straw. And the wood was dipped in pitch, wax, and sulfur, and the straw and tow were fastened on by an iron band. And when lighted, these firebrands were shot from the machines, all bound together by an iron band. And I say so that whenever they fell, the whole mass held together and continued to burn. Such missiles burning as they shot upward could not be resisted by swords or by high walls. It was not even possible for the defenders to find safety down behind the walls. Thus the fight continued from the rising to the setting sun in such splendid fashion that it is difficult to believe anything more glorious was ever done. Then we called on Almighty God, our leader and guide, confident in his mercy, and night brought fear to both sides. The Saracens feared that we would take the city during the night or on the next day, for the outer works were broken through, and the ditch was filled, so that it was possible to make an entrance through the wall very quickly. On our part, we feared that the Saracens would set fire to the machines that were moved close to the walls and thus improve their situation. So, on both sides, it was a night of watchfulness, labor, and sleepless caution. On one side, most certain hope, and on the other, doubtful fear. We gladly labored to capture the city for the glory of God. They less willingly drove to resist our efforts for the sake of the laws of Mohammed. It is hard to believe how great were the efforts made on both sides during the night. And when the morning came, our men eagerly rushed to the walls and dragged the machines forward, and the Saracens had constructed so many machines that for each one of ours they now had 9 or 10. Thus, they greatly interfered with our efforts. This was the 9th day on which the priest had said that we would capture the city. But why do I delay so long? Our machines were now shaken apart by the blows of many stones, and our men lagged because they were very weary. However, there remained the mercy of the Lord, which is never overcome or conquered. But it is always the source of support in times of adversity. One incident must not be omitted. 2 women tried to bewitch one of the hurling machines, but a stone struck and crushed them, as well as 3 slaves, so that their lives were extinguished and the evil incantations averted. By noon, our men were greatly discouraged. They were weary and at the end of their resources. There were still many of the enemy opposing each one of our men, and the walls were very high and strong, and the great resources and skills that the enemy exhibited in the repairing of their defenses seemed too great for us to overcome. But while we hesitated, irresolute, and the enemy exulted in our discomfiture, the healing mercy of God inspired us. and turned our sorrow into joy. For the Lord did not forsake us. While a council was being held to decide whether or not our machines should be withdrawn, for some were burned and the rest badly shaken to pieces, a knight on the Mount of Olives began to wave his shield to those who were who were with the count and others, signaling them to advance. Who this knight was, we have been unable to find out. But at this signal, our men began to take heart, and some began to batter down the walls, while others began to ascend by means of scaling ladders and ropes. Our archers shot burning firebrands, and in this way checked the attack that the Saracens were making upon the wooden towers of the Duke and the two counts. These firebrands, moreover, were wrapped in cotton. The shower of fire drove defenders from the walls. Then the count quickly released the long drawbridge which had protected the side of the wooden tower next to the wall, and it swung down from the top, being fastened to the middle of the tower, making a bridge over which the men began to enter Jerusalem bravely and fearlessly. Among those who entered first were Tancred and the Duke of Lorraine, and the amount of blood that they shed on that day is incredible. All ascended after them, and the Saracens now began to suffer.
The Abercast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Abercast. I'm your Duke tonight. I'm your guardian of the Holy Sepulchre, John Towers. Thank you guys for tuning in. We have a lot of stuff to get through tonight, so we're just going to get into it. The cold open, the featured book, all the reading that we're going to be doing tonight is from this book from 1921 called The First Crusade. The accounts of eyewitnesses and participants. And although it's long and it has its boring moments, it's actually like a real good read. I gave myself the chills getting to the end of that passage about the taking of when Jerusalem fell. So we've done a lot of episodes leading up to this, and also we've done a couple episodes on the First Crusade. So tonight we're going to talk about a lot of things, but mostly we're going to talk about the last major battle and the end of the First Crusade. So now's the time, if you're playing at home, if you're playing along, now is the time for you to mix up your drink A. You have to adhere to the formula. It's much like the firebrand from the cold open. Okay, so let's see here. Where to start? The best place to start is at the beginning. So around 30 or 33 AD, the Roman tyrants executed a rebellious Jewish pacifist by fucking nailing him to a wooden cross and jamming a spear into his side. This man's name was Jesus Christ. And in death, he would go on to become a central figure of one of the most dominant religions in the world. The cross that he was fucking nailed to and the spear that poked through his fucking side and killed him became holy relics of great importance to his followers. Skip ahead to, let's say, 614, the Common Era. Emperor Khosrau II found and removed the true cross of Jesus, the cross that Jesus was crucified on Calvary, the cross that Jesus was crucified on Golgotha. And he removed it from Jerusalem when he conquered it. In 628, the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius, it sounds like a sex thing, Emperor Heraclius defeated Khosrau II and took the cross. And when he took the cross, he put it in Constantinople only for a few years. A few years later, in 630, he took the cross back to Jerusalem, where it faded into history for a while. In the same part of the world, in 632, an ill Arabic prophet and warlord died with his head resting in his wife Aisha's lap. This prophet had married Aisha when he was about 50 and she was about, 6 years old. But don't worry, he didn't consummate the marriage until she was like 9 though, so it's not creepy at all. This man's name was Mohammed. And he also, in death, would become a central figure in one of the world's most dominant religions. This prophet warlord and his followers began and went on a rampage, conquering neighboring lands and spreading this new religion of Islam by the sword for hundreds of years. And they eventually got a foothold in Spain, and they threatened Europe from the south. And they threatened the Byzantine capital of Constantinople to the east. Oh, by the way, happy hijab, Worldwide Hijab Day is this week. I think I'm going to miss it by a few days, but it's this week. I was going to do a whole thing about the hijab, but whatever. 1095, Byzantine Emperor Alexios starts asking Western Christendom for help fighting the Islamic Seljuk Turks. On November 27th, 1095, Pope Urban II calls for crusade to reclaim Jerusalem for Christianity. This was the stated purpose for the First Crusade, was to capture Jerusalem. March 1096, this fucking dude, Peter the Hermit, leads a people's crusade, or the peasants' crusade to Constantinople. So he was like, the peasants' crusade was mostly made up of Germans, I believe. But he heard about the crusade. So the Pope was like, look, go get your fucking armies. Go get your fucking swords. And we're going to go and straighten this fucking mess out. And this dude, Peter the Hermit, heard about this and was like, well, we're not waiting for these guys to get their armies and shit together. We're going first. And predictably, by October of 1096, the Peasants' Crusade had been obliterated. So what had happened with the People's Crusade is these Turkish spies got into the People's Crusaders camp, and they started spreading rumors that this German advanced force had taken Nicaea. And all these People Crusaders got all riled up. They got all hot and bothered, and they started on their way to Nicaea. So the rumor is that Nicaea got taken, and they wanted the bulk of the People's Crusade to move forward to Nicaea. So these guys basically got, how does Ice Cube put it? With no Vaseline, just a match and a little bit of gasoline. On the way to Nicaea, they got ambushed on the road by Turkish archers. This is from Peter the Hermit's Crusade Meets Its Fate. Oh, so, okay, I do have additional reading besides this book, but I'll let you know where it is. This is from an article called Peter the Hermit's Crusade Meets Its Fate at crusadesandcrusaders.com by Deanna Prowich. The Crusaders, thinking that the Turkish army had been roundly defeated at Nicaea, marched on, not suspecting anything until, out of nowhere, a hail of arrows whished through the air and fell upon them, wounding and killing knights and horses. The Turks emerged from their hiding spots and descended upon the Crusaders, and the knights fought hard and bravely, but a great many of them were slaughtered. Those who did survive fled back to Seviat. My French isn't so good, or whatever fucking language this is. But they were hotly pursued by the Turks, and non-combatants saw their knights racing to camp, their eyes ablaze with terror. They attempted escape, but were massacred mercilessly. Young children, only those the Turks considered as physically appealing, were taken as slaves. The few people who managed to escape the wrath of the Turks fled back to Constantinople by way of sea, and they told Peter and the emperor the horrid news. No evidence had been recorded of Peter's reaction to the demise of his followers. His crusade, however, one thing was sure: the massacre at Civitat marked a tragic end to the People's Crusade. So this thing at Civiat they're talking about, I'm just going to keep saying Civiat because I don't fucking know what else it is, but they all retreated to this abandoned castle and they tried to make a stand for it and got butchered. While this was an ill-conceived, mismanaged, and ultimately terrifying waste of human life, this defeat set the stage for the crusade proper. Because in 1097, when the real crusade went from Constantinople across the Bosphorus, the dude who was in command of the Turks, like the Turkish, whatever he is, the guy who was leading them, his name is Kilij Arslan. We've talked about him before. And the Turks didn't really care. They had wiped out the peasants so easily, they just assumed it was going to be more of, that. Well, we know that they were wrong as Nicaea falls before the Crusaders. We talked about this, I believe, in the Warrior Pope episode back a little bit of ways. Sorry, I need a break here. 1097, Dorleone falls. 1098, Antioch falls. And this is when they found that holy lance, the very spear that pierced Christ's side at the crucifixion, was located. This is the discovery of the Holy Lance from HistoryToday.com. Early in June 1098, the army of the First Crusade, heading south through Syria on its way to wrest Jerusalem from the Saracens, captured the city of Antioch. But was promptly shut in the city and besieged by a powerful Turkish Arab force. So here we're getting a little bit of context that once these sieges were over, they were to get counter-sieged, or a counter-attack would ensue. This, I'm only mentioning it because it's important later. Food quickly ran out, morale plummeted, and the Crusaders were nearing desperation when the situation was saved by a miraculous discovery. A scruffy provincial peasant named Peter Bartholomew, with a reputation as a drinker and a womanizer, here, demanded to see Count of Provence, one of the principal crusading leaders. When given an audience with the Count and the Bishop of Lepoy, which is the warrior bishop that we talked about, and explained that St. Andrew had appeared to him in a vision, and he had told him where the Holy Lance was. The very spear that had pierced Christ's side on the cross could be found in a cathedral of St. Peter in Antioch. Count Raymond was impressed, and a mood of excited expectation began to spread through the hard-pressed crusaders in the city. And on June 15th, Count Raymond and the others went with Peter Bartholomew to the cathedral, and workmen dug down into the floor where Peter indicated. Peter himself, was wearing only a shirt, and I'm like, where the fuck is this guy's pants? Jumped down into the trench and triumphantly produced a piece of iron, which everyone immediately hailed as the sacred lance head itself. Now, we all know this is not the actual secret lance head, because that's in the BRPD's maybe the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen's Museum or something. The Roman soldier, I don't know if you guys know this or not, the Roman soldier in some accounts that pierced the side of Christ with that spear, his name was fucking Pantera. And I'm like, that's a vulgar display of power. The excitement in the city was intense as word of the find spread, and this was so transformed that on June 28th, following further instructions issued through Peter Bartholomew by St. Andrew, who guaranteed victory in another vision, the Crusaders sailed out from Antioch, where they were led by their best soldier, the Norman warrior Bohemond of Taranto. And with the Holy Lance carried by Raymond, desperately weak from hunger, and they were in an exalted mood, and some cried out that they would see celestial cavalrymen on white horses riding to help them, bearing white banners and led by St. George. In a berserk frenzy, they sent the besieging Saracens packing and slaughtered many of them in a fight. Victory saved the crusade, and the lance was kept by Count Raymond, who treated it with great reverence. March continues. March 1098, Edessa, the first Crusader state is founded. This is specifically, this county is going to become very important when we get to talking about the Second Crusade. In July 7th of 1099, the Crusaders arrive at the walls of Jerusalem. July 15, 1099, Jerusalem falls to Godfrey de Bouillon, Raymond Tancred, and those other guys. The Crusaders rush to figure out the power structure they need to have, because they knew that there was going to be this counterattack. They'd seen it time and again, and there was bickering and infighting. And when it was all over, Godfrey de Bouillon was named the defender of the Holy Sepulchre. On August 5th, 1099. This is from the New World Encyclopedia's entry on the True Cross. On August 5th, 1099, by Arnulf Malcorn. This dude was under our guy, Lapoy, that bishop. And he was officially made into the official patriarch of Jerusalem and the first Latin patriarch of Jerusalem. Conveniently, at a moment when our morale boost was needed, the relic that Arnulf discovered was a small fragment of wood embedded in a golden cross, and it became the most sacred relic of the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem, and it was housed in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, under the protection of the Latin patriarch, who marched with it ahead of the army before every battle. So this is, we're going to take a break right here. Hey guys, John here. Hey, I wanted to remind you guys about our new limited series we're launching this month, March 3rd. It's called The American Sermon. It's about the occult foundations of the United States. If you dig this show, you'll definitely love that. One, you'll be able to find it on Stitcher and iTunes and Spreaker and a bunch of other little podcatchers. We're working on submitting them to others. If you can't find them anywhere on where you're listening, you can go to abercast.com. There's a page for it, or you can go to our YouTube channel and find it there. Also, we are launching our first contest. It's called the Vessel of the Art giveaway, and we're giving away a fine glass mason jar with the Abercast logo on it. I'm pretty excited about this. Will be some other swag for sure. Next time you apply the formula and you mix up your weapon of mass distraction to watch with the show, you could whip it up into this fucking bad boy right here. Right now, all you have to do is sign in to like the Abercast Facebook page and submit your email. You go to abercast.com, submit to the emailing list. Or the mailing list right there. And once you have those two things, you are entered. We're gonna start doing go live videos on the Abercast page. We've done a couple trial runs so far. We're gonna start doing more of them, and that's where we'll announce the winners. March 20th and April 17th so far. It'll be on there, but these go lives are going on quite often. Don't forget to sign into the mailing list. When you sign in the mailing list, you get access to bonus material. It's usually graphic components of the podcast. And like I said, when you like the Abercast Facebook page, you get access to these go lives and all that stuff that we're rolling out over there. Also, a notification that we have shut down our Patreon in the interest of fighting techno censorship across the galaxy. So things that you need to know right off the bat is this city of Ascalon that we're going to be talking about is like a day and a half away from Jerusalem. So the Battle of Ascalon, August 7th through August 15th, 1099. I think there's two. We're going to be talking about two accounts of the same thing, the same event here. A message came to Tancred and Count Eustace, bidding them to make themselves ready to go take the city of Neapolis. And they went forth, taking along many knights and foot soldiers, and came to the city, but its inhabitants surrendered there. A short while after this, the Duke sent word to them to come quickly to battle, because the Emir of Babylon was ready at the city of Ascalon. When they entered the mountainous regions in haste, seeking fight with the Saracens, and they came to Kakira. And then when they had come near the city of Ramlah, they found there many Arabs who were the forerunners of battle. That means they were the scouts. Our men pursued these and captured several of them, who told all the news of the battle, and they were, how many of them there were, and their plans to fight the Christians. All right. When Tancred heard this, he straightway sent a messenger to Jerusalem, the Duke Godfrey, the patriarch, and all the princes, saying, "Know that battle is being prepared for us at Ascalon. Go there quickly with all the forces that you can obtain." And then the Duke ordered that all be warned to go to Ascalon faithfully, prepared against our enemy. He himself, with the Patriarch and Robert, Count of Flanders, went out to the city on the third day of the week, and the Bishop of Martirano with them. But the Count of St. Giles and Robert the Norman said that they would not go forth. that they knew that battle was certain. Accordingly, they ordered their knights to go and see whether there was a real battle, and to return quickly because they were ready to go straight away. And they went and saw the battle, and they returned quickly with the news that they had seen it with their own eyes. Forthwith the Duke sent word to Jerusalem by the Bishop of Martirano, who had been taken along for the knights who were there to prepare them and come to battle. On the 4th day of the week, those princes went out and rode to battle. The Bishop Martirano went back, hearing the message of the Patriarch, and the Duke and the Saracens coming upon him carried him off captive with them. But Peter the Hermit remained in Jerusalem, ordering and commanding both Greek and Latin clergy faithfully to hold the procession to God and to offer prayers and alms that God might give them victory to his people. Thus the clerics and priests dressed in their sacred vestments and conducted a procession to the temple of the Lord, chanting masses and prayers that he might defend his people. And at length, imagine how fucking crazy this is. The length of the patriarch, bishops, and the other leaders were assembled at the river, which is in the region of Ascalon. And they took plunder of many cattle and camels and sheep and goods of all kinds. However, there almost 300 Arabs came up, and our men rushed upon them and took 2 of them, pursuing the rest up into their army when evening came, and the patriarch had it heralded through the whole host that the earliest morning all should be ready for battle, forbidding any man to pay attention to any spoils until the battle was finished, just saying that when this was done, they might return with joy and good fortune and take all that was predestined to them by the Lord. At early dawn on the 6th day of the week, they entered a very beautiful valley near the seacoast, where they arranged their lines. The Duke drew up his line, the Count of Normandy his, and the Count of St. Giles his, the Count of Flanders his, Tancred and Gaston theirs, and also arranged foot soldiers and bowmen to precede the knights. And so they ordered everything and began to fight immediately in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. On the left side was Duke Godfrey with his line, and the Count St. Giles rode near the sea to his right side. The Count Normandy, the Count of Flanders, Tancred, and all the rest rode in the middle. Then our men began to move about a little, and the enemy stood ready for battle, and each one had his water bag hanging from his neck, out of which they could drink as they pursued us. But the grace of God, they were not accorded this privilege. Moreover, the Count of Normandy, perceiving that the standard of the emir had a kind of golden apple on the top of a spear, which was worked with silver, rushed violently upon him and wounded him even to death. On the other side, Count Flanders was fiercely rushed upon, and the enemy, Flanders very fiercely rushed upon the enemy. Okay, that's better. Tancred thereupon made a charge through the middle of their tents, and when the pagans saw this, they straightway took to flight. The multitude of pagans was innumerable, and no one knows their number except God alone. And the battle was huge, but accompanying us was the divine might, so great, so strong, that we overcame them immediately. Moreover, our enemies stood blinded and stupefied, and though looking at the knights of Christ with open eyes, they saw nothing, thus terrified at the valor of God. They dared not rise up against the Christians. In the excess of their fear, they climbed trees in which they sought to hide themselves, but our men brought them to earth by shooting and killing them with lances and spears. Others threw themselves on the ground, not daring to stand up against us. Our men cut them into pieces, just as one cuts an animal into pieces for the market. The Count of St. Giles killed them without number, but some flung themselves into the sea, and others fled hither and hither. Thereupon the Emir, coming in front of the city, grieving and sorrowfully weeping, said, O spirits of the gods, whoever saw or heard of such a thing? Such might and such valor, such military skill never exceeded by any people, is now conquered by a band of Christians, so little that they could be enclosed in the hollow of a hand. Alas, grief and sadness are mine. What more shall I say? I'm conquered by a race, beggarly, unarmed, and very poor, a race that has nothing except a beggar's scrip and cloak. And now they pursue the Egyptian people who commonly gave them alms when in olden times they begged through our whole land. Hither, according to agreement, I have brought together 200,000 knights, and behold, I see them fleeing with loose bridles along the road to Babylon. And I dare not turn my back against the Frankish people. I swear by Mohammed and by all the names of all the gods that since I am driven out of this by this foreign people, I will no longer retain knights for any gathering. I have brought all kinds of weapons and instruments and machines to besiege Jerusalem, and they have come before me to battle by 2 days. Alas, what would be mine if I had led their people as my own? Woe is me. What more shall I say? I will be forever disgraced in the land of Babylon. Our men, moreover, took the standard which the Count of Normandy brought for 20 marks of silver and gave to the patriarch in the honor of God and the Holy Sepulchre. And someone brought a sword for 60 bezants, and so, God willing, our enemy were conquered. All the ships of the pagans' lands were there, but when the men saw them, the emir fleeing with his army, they immediately hoisted sail and rowed out to the deep water. Our men returned to their tents and took a great amount of spoil, gold, silver, a heap of all kinds of goods, horses and mules, asses and camels, innumerable sheep and cattle and instruments. For all mountains and hills and level places were covered with the multitude of the enemy's animals. Finding piles of arms, also they carried off what they wished and burned the rest. Our men returned with joy to Jerusalem, bringing along goods of every description, to wit, camels, asses laden with biscuits, butters, grain, cheese, bread, oil, and all the goods they need. This battle was fought on the day before the Ides of August. Our Lord Jesus Christ granting this, who hath honor and glory, and now ever forever. Let every spirit say amen. All right, this is the second account. Goes like this. And when, as we said above, it had been arranged that the Duke of Lorraine should keep the city, but when the Count, embittered with grief and wrong because he had easily lost the Tower of David, that is, the capital of the whole kingdom of Judea, was arranging for this reason to turn with most of our people, it was announced to us that the king of Babylon had come to Ascalon with a countless multitude of pagans. And as it was told to us, he had come to take Jerusalem by storm, to kill all the Franks above 22 years and take the rest together with the women captive, to give the males to women of their own race, give the males to women of his own race, and the women to his youths, so that the lords of Babylon might then have a warlike family of the race of Franks. But not content with this, he said he would do the same with Antioch and Bohemond, and he said likewise that he would place upon the head of the diadems of Damascus and the rest of the cities. And he said that the Turks and the Franks, victors over the Turks, were nothing in comparison with the multitude of his foot soldiers and knights. But not even content with this, he turned to blasphemy against God, saying, I will destroy the place of the Lord's nativity. So, this guy's out here talking shit. He's talking about destroying these historical sites in Jerusalem that were important to these Christians. The place of the Passion, Golgotha, where they say flowed the blood of the Lord hanging upon the cross. The tomb, all these places, all venerated by these Christians. And he says, I will tear them by their roots from the earth and break them. And after this, I will cast the dust into the sea so that there will be no longer any memorial of the Lord for the people of the Franks to seek. So this wasn't going to happen. These guys weren't going to just sit there. So they deployed the scouts to these plains of Ramallah to get a good look around. And they were like, hey, bros, this thing is on. So these guys geared up. They got their armor. They grabbed their swords and their lances and all this shit. And then one guy got the true cross and left Jerusalem. And they linked up with their scouts and advanced forces and established their garrison even a day or so out. So even a day or so out, you need to figure for logistics and provisions and so forth. And these guys just got infused, with supplies. The Crusaders had 1,200 knights and 9,000 infantrymen versus these Fatimans who had 20,000 men. And they came across something weird. They were all these animals, and there were these Arab shepherds and their flocks of like sheep and a lot of cows. The book says innumerable herds of cattle and camels without number. And these Crusaders were like, what the fuck are all these animals doing? And they sent some guys out there to figure it all out. So we're going back to the book. The other armed men, we said, were advancing in 9 squadrons, and there were 3 in the rear, 3 in the front, and 3 in the middle. So arranged that from whatever side the battle came in, it would be met with those 3 ranks in the middle of the squadron, remaining as a support to the support of all. When the Arab herdsmen, however, saw the knights who had been sent ahead, they deserted their animals, and yet if God were regarding them as he regarded us, they surely have entered upon a fight with us all. They were about 3,000 herdsmen in arms. But to our army, we were hesitatingly ascribed more than 1,200 knights, and we dare not pull the number of footmen beyond 9,000. And also, when the herdsmen had fled, we took as much plunder as we saw on that day. Some of the herdsmen were killed and a few were captured. After this, however, we remained in the same place because of the evening. And we forced the captives to confess, like a good Catholic. And the intentions of the enemy, their condition and number, and they confessed, therefore, that it was the will of the people to besiege Jerusalem and take the Franks by storm, kill and capture them. And they added that the emir was in camp 5 leagues away, ready to set forth against us on the next day. Their number, however, scarcely anyone was certain, since they were being multiplied daily by when questioned about themselves and their companions, they said that they were herders of animals, which were to be distributed for a price among the forces of Babylonians. Accordingly, our men, eager and assured of battle, sent back to their companions the cause of trouble and controversy. After this, they confessed their sins and their negligence, and they were so cheered in spirit that it seemed scarcely credible to them that the enemy were prepared for battle. For such security grew up in the hearts of each man, that they believed their enemy were timid, more timid than hinds and more harmless than sheep. But when we had this security because we believed that God was with us, as in the other matter, that because of the blasphemy made against him, he would deal with them on his own account, even if our cause were valueless. Therefore, we regarded him as our defender, and ourselves the aids of him in his struggle. Then it was proclaimed through the army that all should be ready for battle in the morning, and that each one should attach himself to the attach himself to the princes of his people, and that no one should plunder. No one should touch plunder, like we heard about already. No one should touch plunder, and anyone who touched it before the battle was finished would be excommunicated. We spent that night poorly enough, for we had no tents. We had a few had bread, no one had wine, and very few grain and salt, but the meat was abundant as sand. We ate meat and bread, for we had the soft flesh of sheep. And now the morning of the following day was drawing, and the watchful host was aroused by the fight, and the sound of trumpets and horns. So at daybreak we set forth, draw up, as we have already described, the guards on every side, and directed the army of God against the camp of Mohammed. But the enemy lingered within their camp, thinking that it was their approaching, that it was at their approach we would not even stay inside our walls. For when they heard of the death and the flight of the herdsmen, they said, "The Franks have come for plunder and have gone back with it." They were being daily informed, forsooth, for those who fled from Jerusalem of our small number and of the weakness of our people and horses. Besides relying on their numbers and strength, they believed that they could drown us in our camp in their spit alone. Ugh, that's fucking disgusting. Likewise, their stargazers and soothsayers, as it were reported, said that they ought neither to move their camp nor fight against us until the 7th day of the week. That if they wished to do any of these things earlier, matters would turn out adversely. We advanced. We drew up in squadrons, and we, as we have said, God multiplied his army so that, this is funny, God multiplied his army so that we did not seem inferior in numbers to the enemy. For the animals which we had left joined themselves to us in forming herds, though no one drove them, they accompanying us, so that they stood when we halted, ran when we ran, and advanced with our advance. The amount of precious spoil was inestimable. Moreover, one can count on the arm, Moreover, who can count all the arms or tents? When our enemies saw their multitude cut into pieces, and our men securely and eagerly fighting, and their tents for victory and spoil, they turned and said to themselves, "Flight is our only protection, and why delay? If these men, worn out from their march, almost half dead from hunger and thirst, have today prostrated all of our multitude in one charge, what will they do when rested, refreshed, and victorious against us, half destroyed, lessened in numbers, and terrified?" Accordingly, the enemy returned in disturbed mind to Ascalon, which was about a mile from our camp, but not all of them. When it pleased Raymond to send a certain Bohemond, a Turk by birth, to the emir, under the pretense of entering upon a friendship, blaming him because he had been unwilling to surrender Jerusalem freely, and because he had borne arms against us, Bohemond was at the same time to find out whether the emir was mediating flight or battle, and how it conducted himself in defeat. So, how did these crusaders defeat such an overwhelming force? Was the spear that pierced Christ's side? Was it the piece of the Holy Cross which was carried before the Christian army into battle? I don't know about any of that. But what I do know is that the commander of the Muslim forces made at least one enormous mistake here. And he assumed the Crusaders would choose to defend Jerusalem at the walls. He also failed to send enough scouts and so forth, but Godfried and the Crusaders made at least 3 breathtakingly awesome moves. Godfried and the boys, rather than let the enemy dictate the place of battle, instead they took the enemy enemy's initiative away from them. Instead of defending against a siege, they rolled their dice on taking the enemy on an open plain, which we have talked about this before. Generally, you have to be very careful, especially when your enemy has the numbers, which these Muslims had here for sure. The Crusaders, remember, had about half of the numbers of the Fatimids. The Crusaders maneuvered to take the initiative. They chose the battlefield and they executed with violence of action rather than taking a defensive position. So when you're on the open plain, this is the Battle of the Bastards situation, right? You have to think about that double envelopment, the pincer move, as everyone calls it. And this led to an absolute smashing of this army. Just a humiliating defeat across the board for these guys. Pope Urban II dies July 19th, 1099. He never hears the news of the Crusaders taking Jerusalem, which was the main goal of the whole endeavor in the first place. And hostilities never end. In the times between this first and the oncoming Second Crusade, there was always fighting and always bloodshed. And even though Christendom held Jerusalem and a number of other cities and holds, Europeans would start coming to the Holy Land and these various sacred sites on pilgrimages. And even though the Crusaders held these cities, and these cities were safe for the pilgrims, the rest of the land was not. Pilgrims would get robbed and slaughtered. And if you were a child and were physically attracted, you were probably taken as slaves, as we heard. It seems that in the wake of these First Crusades and these pilgrims, what the Holy Land really needed was like this group of super knights who could protect these pilgrims on the road. Yeah. I think that's exactly what was needed. The New World Encyclopedia entries on the True Cross says the True Cross was eventually captured by Saladin during the Battle of Hattin in 1187, which is the battle of the Second Crusade, and subsequently disappeared once again into history. All right. Thanks for listening. Towers, over and out. Everybody, don't forget about the American Sermon. You can find it in a lot of good places, a lot of good pod places. If you're whatever pod catcher you pay attention to, whether it be like iHeartRadio or whatever, you can't find it and you don't want to download another one just to catch a show, remember, you can always go to our iTunes, or our fucking YouTube channel. You go to our YouTube channel, the show gets put up there the day it gets published. So there is that. And don't forget about our Vessel of the Art giveaway. Right now, all you have to do is like our Facebook page, the Abracast Facebook page, and sign into the newsletter, and you're registered to win the sweet-ass mason jar and some other swag. And the mason jar has the Abracast logo on it. Again, it's called the Vessel of the Art giveaway. We're going to be doing announcing the winner on March 20th and another one on April 17th on a go live on the Abracast Facebook page. So check us out there. We're rolling out these go lives and we're doing it often. We're doing them often. So you're missing stuff out if you're not following the Facebook page. Don't forget to check out the website. There's social media links at the bottom, abracast.com. Sign into the mailing list. You get access to some bonus. Usually it's it's visual components or additional notes to the episodes. And, the Abracast Facebook page, the Abracast YouTube page. You could join us all there. Social media site, website, mailing list. That's it. All right. Out.